Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Louisiana Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Carl Wiggers, your host, and today we're talking all things crawfish and crawfish disaster. And if you're familiar with this podcast, you've probably already heard us talking about crawfish disaster. I feel like we talk about disaster every other podcast, but that's what we do, is try to work to help aid farmers that are, impacted by disastrous weather or economic times. Today, I've got Andy Brown joining me. He's the
National Affairs Director.
what is your actual title? It's National Affairs Director?
Commodity Public Policy and National Affairs Director.
Today, I've got Andy Brown joining me. He wears many hats. National Affairs is one of those hats he wears where he's the guy going to D.C. and keeping great relationships with all of the staff and representatives in that world up there in D.C. Andy, thanks for joining me. Let's dive into it. It's a lot. You've been a little bit busy with crawfish. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it's been a big part of my life. So much so that my daughter thinks she needs pet crawfish to play with in the yard. So she's proud of her dad today.
Really quick aside, I saw somebody traveling, some Instagram influencer from Louisiana traveling with a crawfish through an airport with sunglasses.
Oh yeah, I saw that too. The what was it? The service crawfish.
Yeah, something like
yeah.
So you can get Evie. I'm sure there's probably a product line coming out.
She'd want to put sunglasses on them for sure.
Well, let's talk. I feel like before we get too deep into the issue, we've talked a lot about the disaster side of crawfish industry, but there are crawfish out there, right? For some folks that still want crawfish. It's not like it's been a total absolute loss statewide, right?
Yeah, it's been slow, it's been slim, but it's been late. But it's late now, and there is crawfish out there, and the prices come way down. And the best thing for any listener to do, besides pump us up about this assistance we're going to talk about, but the assistance you can give a crawfish farmer is go buy a couple sacks this weekend and boil them. They're delicious, affordable, and there's good quality out there. Just may, not make that farmer whole, but we're going to help with that too.
Well, let's back up then to really cover this whole story. We kind of have to start not a year ago, but close to it. Like last summer, fall, we were dealing with, extraordinary drought, unprecedented really in the state. It was probably records, I would assume.
Oh yeah, it was a 100-year drought. We had 40 days over 100 degrees last year in 23. I think the data shows. So it was drought, it was heat, and it was salt water. There was a lot of issues with either too salty a water or just lack of surface water. All that, we started to see. That drought and heat was really hitting July, August, and into September. So in September is when you have to certify crawfish acres, and that's really when a lot of this was really taken off. It's been that long, but that's when we really dug in to start to see what we could do in case it was as bad as we thought it might be, and sure enough, it was.
And that's when, rice farmers are starting to, put the tractors back in the shed and start thinking towards flooding the fields and getting their crawfish crop ready.
Yeah, that's when
and that's when they started to find the problems, right?
That's right. Yeah, and that's when you make your ratoon crop versus do I go ahead and start trying to crawfish, all those agronomic decisions. And that's when, people are starting to know if some of that stocking they did in July and August, but people were scared to do that. And then they were scared about their water situation. And then the real early folks down south, maybe into October, start to know what kind of crop they're going to have. So as that was playing out all along, we're starting to ramp up our efforts that have been long going. We've been working on crawfish assistance. Unfortunately, there's been a need 3 out of the last 4 years for random things, from COVID, then a freeze, then another freeze, and then the market downturn in 23 because it was then flooded with too much product. So it's been a roller coaster.
I was going to bring that up because you are typically a row crop and rice guy. Like that's kind of the commodities you oversee. And in 2020 during COVID, as far as most people were concerned, you were also a crawfish commodity guy, and that wasn't even your commodity at the time. You were just working it so hard in D.C.
Yeah, that's Ron Harrell and
I.
Right? As I was coming on and really coming into my own in that role. Ron was easing out towards retirement, and so we were working a lot together. And he knew the needs of the crawfish farmer and wanted me to do my thing in D.C. and help carry that message and facilitate through the relationships. My job that as National Affairs Director is to keep that fire hot and keep Farm Bureau on the front burner in those offices. So it was a great learning experience, and honestly, we broke the glass ceiling for crawfish. When I got here, I say my little title on this podcast is Mississippi Hillbilly most of the time, but just some guy from the hills of Mississippi coming to South Louisiana, had row crop experience, but I didn't know much about crawfish besides I like to eat them. And so I learned a lot, but when I got here to work and on these issues, all I was told was what all couldn't be done in crawfish. It's never been done. You can't do this. They don't believe in that. USDA doesn't recognize it. Nobody understands it. And just really didn't take that for an answer. That's not how I like to live, and I'm stubborn in a way. And so just started learning our way through it, and thankfully have some good, bold leaders who also didn't want to take no for an answer, and began to really build a relationship and a national prominence that we're here to legitimize crawfish, and it's we're 3 for 3.
Yeah, that's one thing about that was, that was probably not your first big win, is getting that assistance during the year 2020 with COVID, and that was a crazy year for a million reasons. But that was not your first big legislative or bringing home the bacon for the Louisiana farmers. But it was probably one of those that sticks out when you look back in 20 years. When you look back to your career, that was probably going to be one of those that sticks out for you, huh?
$60-some-odd million at one time, and COVID money was definitely my biggest win to date. But this is kind of part of the whole philosophy. Why our listener hears about crawfish so much is because there was nobody doing it. There was nobody stepping up and bringing the industry together to fight for something in a unified way, in that Farm Bureau way, where we're bringing everybody to the table and putting differences aside and getting something done. So it just was there was a need to be met, and so we jumped in and we've been really just building on top of that time after time and getting more people involved and excited about it, more people educated, and that's what it's about. So
you mentioned the multiple years of working on some issue related to crawfish. The freeze of 2021, the flooded market in 23. This is not something that all of a sudden a freeze happens and we start calling D.C. saying, hey, this is Andy Brown with Louisiana Farm Bureau. That conversation, that relationship is constant.
Yeah, so the farm-raised fish was put in a farm bill 2 farm bills ago, but speed of government, and if you're not being that squeaky wheel, a lot of things go undone. And so we it took years to even get ELAP off the ground. We probably wouldn't have got that done if it weren't for CFAP and COVID and all the work we did there. But 21 was the first time we were able to secure what we're going to talk about here in a minute, what's going to help us again this year, which is the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program. So work Ron did, work J.B. Hanks did, Adler Stelly, our committee members, before I got on the scene, was legitimizing crawfish as livestock in USDA's eyes, and other aquaculture species partnering with us on that, National Aquaculture Association, Catfish, others. So that's the start. I didn't come in and just dream all this up. There was already things in
Foundation
play.
laid.
But what we've been able to do now is we got a ELAP payment in 21 for the freeze. It was very successful, but it must have been too successful because then they changed the rules on us going into 22. Decided a freeze no longer looked like 32 degrees, it looked like 10 degrees. And in South Louisiana, it's not just crawfish going to die at 10 degrees. We all going to die. We're going to be cooped up for a month. So we've been working on ELAP, and not just the temperature, but the metrics of that program nonstop since 2021.
Even after the disaster, after the payments came out.
Yeah, when everybody gets their
started to
payment and everybody else goes home, Farm Bureau's still here to get things done and make sure that we are preparing for whatever is to come
the next time.
And that's why we do what we do, because here we are, fall of 23, what we talked about a minute ago, staring a drought and excessive heat in the face, looking, okay, what do we do now? And we're already prepared. And in September, Congresswoman Letlow drops a farm bill marker to draw a line in the sand to say, if USDA won't get something done, then eventually we're going to get something done for our crawfish farmers. And that was kind of the big splash that started all this real momentum and movement to getting done what we're going to get done here today.
And I'm sure that she did that without any help from the Louisiana Farm Bureau. We had no say in anything that was going on there with that.
Seeing as how it was a part of a grander package that also included livestock drought, which we had all kind of pods about back in the summer and a ton of effort. So we're a general farm organization. It's never just one thing. We got so many irons in the fire. The toughest thing we have is trying to juggle them all and keep them all hot. So
that's why we pay you the big bucks.
Well, and it's not just me. That's why we got a whole team.
Yeah.
And we got a whole host of volunteer leaders. But
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, Miss Letlow is amazing, and she's always been, a good partner in things that we're trying to make sure we get done, because she has a lot of row crops, a lot of agriculture in her district that, it's in her interest too to take care of her own.
Yep.
So we're talking ELAP. Let's kind of we've come from COVID to the freeze of 21. Let's bring it to today. We're talking ELAP for drought or excessive heat, like this current disaster. Where are we at? What's coming out?
So we have the same. USDA has policies and procedures, and the government likes to fit things in their little boxes that they already have drawn up. What we were preaching on pods before and all over everything you've seen from Farm Bureau is drought, drought, drought. Congresswoman Letlow's bill, Senator Kennedy's bill are addressing drought. Well, we got to probably about a month ago when we really had the heat turned up on this thing with Governor Landry and Congressman Carter and Congressman Higgins and really the whole delegation, even up to the speaker. We're all knocking on USDA's door at this point. Where's drought? Get us drought. We need something for this drought. And thankfully, through relationships like everything else, I had a career staff person at USDA who knows the ins and outs of their shop better than I do, who I'd been working a lot with, came to me and said, Andy, I'm not telling you what to do, but if y'all are successful in getting drought, that'd be great for y'all and great for everybody. But you're not going to get your farmers a payment probably for at least a year, because it's going to be back of house government red tape city where we're having to write policy, write trainings, do new rules, do comment periods, all kind of government stuff. It's like, if you can find us some science and you can prove that drought and heat contributed to this, then you might have a quicker shot. And so we had already gone down that road, and they kind of turned us around from heat. We went right back, and like we always do, when we need a scientific answer, we pick up the phone and call the AgCenter. And LSU jumped right on top of it. It's nobody over there's daily job description to go figure out what heat does to crawfish, but we had a team of scientists jump right in it because they wanted to help the industry like I do. And so we delivered that and a lot of other stuff. We have 7 or 8 white papers that have been generated just in the last few months, just a ton of effort that all culminated into this announcement that they're going to allow crawfish to get an ELAP payment due to excessive heat. That's
huge. So it's not a normal same as the freeze. There are some changes that happened in this current iteration, I guess, of ELAP. Is that the right way to say that?
Yeah, so the formula framework, if you will, the X, Y, and Z are all...
Andy, I'm in communications and media. I stayed out of math as best I could.
Well, in Ag Econ, they called them ag courses, but it was really algebra and calculus. So let me X, Y, and Z it for a minute. The X, the first part of this, just like in 21, is based on the loss of production. this is a huge deal that USDA's not bent the rules, but got creative for us. That ELAP's supposed to be an inventory program. You're supposed to go out there and count your head of cows and know how many you had when you started. Then the disaster hit and you go count them again. You know how many you have left.
Pretty simple. I can do that math probably.
Well, yeah, that math you can do. What you can't do is go to a crawfish pond and count how many crawfish you have. Definitely can't count how many eggs or babies that mama crawfish had on her belly when she went into her burrow. So there's no way to get a true inventory. So what they've done is allowed crawfish farmers to use a production history to say, well, I typically have this inventory, like this is what I typically catch.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever disaster happened and I have caught Y.
Mm-hmm.
So you take that difference, so that's your loss, okay? And then you take that loss times a price, and then you get paid across those acres. So you only get paid on 75% of that. No disaster program of any kind, crop insurance, ad hoc disaster, standing disaster. None of them ever make a farmer whole. So taxpayer, rest assured, this isn't a moneymaker.
Nobody's getting
for our
rich off of
farmer. This is a keep us in business. But that equates to hopefully what's going to keep our guys in business. And but the changes that were made there and the real effort that we've been putting in is to make all of those X, Y's, and Z's better. We had in 21, we had the county averages or parish averages. FSA calls them counties. That was all you could use. So you had to use whatever average, dependent on how good your neighbors are, how long they fish, or whatever the market dictated that year. That was a problem. Some people that works great because they don't have production records, they don't have a lot of history, but for somebody that's a true commercial crawfish producer, a lot of them were above that average. So you're kind of getting penalized for being good. It's like you're
for producing good crops.
Yeah,
you're not getting the benefit of that.
Yeah, better way to say it. Definitely. So we've fought really hard and given them a lot of information that said, do like some of your other programs and let a farmer certify. Let them say, this is my production history, and this is the what I'm making inputs for. This is where my costs are geared towards. So let's base it off of this number.
Mm-hmm.
So that's honestly the biggest win inside the program dynamics.
The X, Y's, and Z's.
Yeah, that we get down in the details on.
One thing about that, I mean, somebody might say, well, I don't really want to open my books, but if it's going to lead to a better payment out of this program, I feel like a lot of folks are going to be really quick to show their work and show their history, right? I mean,
yeah, and that's why we wanted an option. So not just that reason, but there's a part of this that some in the crawfish industry don't want to participate in this kind of stuff because they want to keep their information private, and we respect that. Nothing says you have to go get this payment. But for the ones that need it, they'll give you their retina scan. They'll give you, you can take a DNA sample, whatever you want. They'll get it because they're that desperate for some help.
Yeah.
And so, that's up to the producer to make that decision.
And real quick, I'm going to back up. You mentioned the work Adler Stelly's done, but even before you were working with Crawfish,
Yep.
Crawfishman down in Vermilion Parish, who went to D.C. with you to advocate on behalf of this. And from all accounts, did a great job of telling his story on Capitol Hill. But he was telling some wild numbers of loss.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're making up for a 10% loss. He's talking about like 95%, 90% loss.
Yeah,
in his production.
It's probably come up a little bit for him. I haven't checked with him exactly, but most folks I've talked to, they're a quarter of their production or less.
Yeah. So it's not like you had to look very hard to find like, oh, this year is a little bit of a down year. It was a pretty clear spike.
Yeah, it was,
or valley.
Abundantly evident that it was a hard, not just a hard season. Like, think about that from your weekly budget at your house or your paycheck per the month or your annual salary. Or if you're a business owner, your gross revenue for the year. How many businesses can operate off of a quarter, 25%, or less of their revenue. Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't get lending. You can't do anything with that kind of debt to income ratio. So this is real business stuff. It's not just guys in a boat, out with their hip boots on having a good time. This is their business, their livelihood, and it's the local economy in a lot of places. Yeah.
There are middlemen like in the processing and stuff. Like there's a huge, like it expands really quickly when you start thinking about it beyond the guy that's going to sign the line on this application when it comes time for this. Let's talk about the other part. You said that the X, Y's, and Z's are one of the big things that's changed in the benefit of the farmer. How else did LSU? I know LSU came into play to help with another part of this equation, right?
Yeah, they've been instrumental in helping us update those county yields, but also the world has changed a lot since 2021. The cost of production for a lot of these folks are 1.5, 2 times or more what they were even in 2021. So the same factors from even just a few years ago we're not going to be adequate, which is the same message we're preaching for soybeans, for rice, for cotton, for anything with this farm
bill, right?
Is we need updated safety net. Well, this is a safety net program. We need an updated safety net in this as well. So that's been the other part. USDA has heard that loud and clear and has thankfully worked really well in letting us, letting LSU, let the experts, because this is so local. That is the biggest challenge. Anything with crawfish, we kind of touched on at the beginning, is they've never seen it. They don't understand it. They think it's a crayfish in a creek that you put on a hook to
or
catch
invasive
a bass.
Species.
Or in some states, unfortunately. Yep. Working on that too, by the way. But so that's the education. That's the Farm Bureau message is you've got a guy like me every day checking in on all that. And then when I need the people who actually know what cost of production increases look like, then I call a J.B. Hanks or an Adler Stelly or a Chad Hanks or a Joey Olivier or David Savoy, whoever. We got a whole list of them. And we plug them in, and they are rock stars.
I want to back up really fast. You just talked about getting this cost of production from LSU to the USDA. I feel like sometimes, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like sometimes in the way that we talk and in the way we're talking about we're trying to work with the USDA and get them to come on board, we almost make them sound like the villains in the story. They're the government. It is what it is. They have a lot of policy to follow and they're working on a lot more issues than just crawfish. But they're not the bad guys. They're trying to help. And you just talked about, you have a buddy there that you've worked with for a while that you know pretty well. I think it's safe to say he's probably not a bad guy and he wants to help farmers. That's probably true of most people in that building, right?
Yeah, and then they're,
they want to have this be a win for Louisiana because it's a win for them, right?
Exactly, yeah, but they also don't want to do it wrong and give crawfish too much money so that when mama cows need it, there's not enough left to go around because they only are allotted so much from Congress. So, yeah, they have a responsibility to do due diligence and do their part. But, yeah, they obviously by them coming back to us about excessive heat, they wanted to find a way to do it. Now, did a lot of political pressure to some of their political appointed bosses really help with that? Yeah, but the career folks behind the scenes that know what can and can't be done by the handbook that they've been given, they're the ones nobody talks about and nobody knows about. Yeah. But we couldn't have done it without them either.
I just had that realization right now, real time. Like I feel like we always, anytime we're referring to USDA, it's the government man that is just out to get the farmer, and it's not the case. I feel like in most of these situations.
Yeah, definitely not in this instance. Yeah. So yeah, we're thankful.
I wanted to talk nice about them for just a second because I feel like usually they're on the other side of that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
For the farmers that are hopefully going to be applying for some of this, money to help keep in business, pay the bills, and put in a rice crop or hopefully crawfish again this fall next year. What is our call to action? What is our message to them as far as next steps?
First step, y'all know me. Everything we've talked about is due to a whole lot of people. So while this program won't be perfect, there'll be people that are disappointed that somebody else that did less got more than them, or all the things you typically hear. Give us a few days to smile and say thank you and say, we'll call you next time because y'all were so great in helping us. And that starts with folks like Governor Landry, who, as soon as he got in office, took to the press to help us get momentum and took to letters to get a disaster declaration. Folks like Congressman Troy Carter, who doesn't have much production but knows how important it is to his district on the retail side and the restaurant side. Folks like Clay Higgins, that is the heart of crawfish country, who's been with us from COVID to today, just a constant champion for crawfish without a doubt. And then it doesn't stop either, so we need to continue to say thank you to folks like Senator John Kennedy, who has the Crawdad Act, thinks enough of it to put it in writing, and then without a doubt Julia Letlow, who we're going to plug some videos in for y'all to go watch from some hearings. Without her being that bulldog in the background, putting that pressure, constant pressure, with all those other folks, kind of behind her, we wouldn't be here today. And then secondly, try to be patient. First say thank you, but then say, how can I help? And that's to your local FSA office. This is a lot of extra work on them. All disaster programs are extra work. That doesn't fall short on us. So go in, ask questions, be prepared, be diligent. Make sure you go to that office and stay on them to get your payment, your assistance. And then lastly, what I really hope people, what would really help me, I get a lot of nice people that have no idea who I am. They heard about me from 3 farmers down the line who may be plugged in with Farm Bureau. But get involved with us. Get a membership. The best way they can thank me, to thank our team here, to thank our volunteer leaders, is to not sit on the sideline and expect we can go do it again and again and again without them, putting a little skin in the game. Mm-hmm. So this doesn't, I don't get a bonus to my salary because I went and got a big government check for the industry. It doesn't change anything for me. It's just what I love to do. But I love what I do, and to continue to do what I do, I got to have a pipeline of folks just like all the volunteers that I mentioned to continue to get that done.
Right. Well, that's what makes Farm Bureau. Joe Mapes will tell you he can't go to the Capitol without knowing he's got 144,000 strong behind him. And he can't get anything done in the Capitol without knowing he's got the members of Farm Bureau. I was with him in the state Capitol the other day with a handful of the Women's Leadership Committee, and he was saying, these are the members I'm talking about, talking to the delegation that was there. These are the members that I'm talking about whenever I'm coming and saying farmers and ranchers back home. And I think that's the same with you when you go to D.C. or when you bring up this crawfish. I've got all these crawfish, and you can start pulling out your Rolodex like you just did, saying I've got all these crawfish farmers who are going to go out of business if we're not here to step up and bridge that gap.
Well, and I'm in the business of thanking our elected officials, and there's no doubt we wouldn't have got this done without them. But the true turning of the tide for this instance here was when one of our crawfish leaders just went out on a limb and fought his way into getting a meeting in D.C. when he was already there, and just sat down and explained what crawfish production looked like to very intelligent, high-ranking USDA officials who know a lot about a lot of things in ag, but have just never laid their eyes on crawfish and could not conceptualize how a fish or a crustacean, something that lives underwater, could be affected by heat and drought. And when that conversation happened, just like, you might have at the coffee shop to somebody that doesn't know how crawfish was produced, that changed the entire game. And that's when we went from drought, help us, what are we going to do, to excessive heat, ELAP, get us data, let's get it done. And that's the power of Farm Bureau.
Well, Andy, thank you for joining me on the podcast, talking about all this exciting news. I know you've been. I texted Andy this morning for anyone curious and said, "Hey, can I get you a coffee this morning?" He said, "I don't need it. I'm jacked up, ready to go."
Turn my mic down, Josh. We fired up, baby. We're going. I need everybody to use this momentum and help us continue to do what we do. We're not just working on crawfish. I can't leave this pod without saying that. Working on so many other things, from eminent domain to soybean crop insurance to cattle to sugar to you name it. We're
Farm
still
bill.
the general farm organization, and there's a whole team working on a whole host of things. This is just a huge win, and we're going to celebrate it today.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if you'd like to learn more and see some of the stories we've done with crawfish farmers over the past few months to see how they've been affected, we have a story with Adler Stelly, for instance. I'll put those in the show notes, and you can learn more about all that down there. And if you want to become a Farm Bureau member, you can do that also in the show notes. Click a link, quick form, fill it out. It's $40, $45, depending on your parish. It's not much, but it does. It works wonders when you can get behind and support the work that we're doing here, like getting this assistance to crawfish farmers who need it. That's it for this episode. We'll see you again right here next week on the Louisiana Farm Bureau podcast.